Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. And next up, we've got a gentleman who's quickly become one of my favorite writers at National Review and in general. He is David French. I had the opportunity, which was a real treat, to sit down with David and tape an Against the Current long-form interview. So we've got a few minutes with David today, but if you want a good hour of full, unfiltered French, then you want to go to upstream-ideas.com and check out the interview that I did of Mr. French.
Unfiltered French. It sounds like a new segment.
Well, it could be.
You know?
Yeah, that could be. Against the Current is the series. Upstream-ideas.com is the website. But unfortunately, we joined David this morning, like the last time we spoke to Rich Lowry, where there's a mourning going on at National Review. When we spoke to Rich Lowry, it was after William F. Buckley's longtime assistant, Linda Bridges, passed away. Today, it's mourning the loss of Katie O'Byrne, a longtime National Review contributor, editor. You saw her on television a lot if you paid attention in the 90s and the first part of this century on shows like Capital Gang. A very eloquent voice for conservatism, and she passed away over the weekend, and there's been a lot of tributes coming in from Mona Charen and Rich Lowry and a lot of the staff at National Review and in conservative circles more generally. David French, senior writer for National Review, as well as senior fellow at the National Review Institute, and a constitutional lawyer, joins us now. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Did you have any intersection at National Review or in your professional life with Katie O'Byrne, and did you want to weigh in on her passing at all?
Yeah, very, unlike, because I joined National Review full-time pretty recently.
Right.
Unlike a lot of the guys who came up, literally since out of college with the National Review, I'd had very brief interactions with her, but I tell you, she had such a profound impact on my colleagues and the folks that I've worked with that it was not unexpected news because we had known of the terrible diagnosis, but when it happened, it was very sad. And I think to understand their impact, you go to nationalreview.com and you read some of the pieces there and how heartfelt they are. And you really realize, that people, the impact that people can have in professional lives and personal lives at the same time. It's a pretty amazing tribute to her and to her influence.
And she was quick with the quip too. In one of the tributes I read, where she said once that when a man marries his mistress, a job opening has been created. It's just giving you a sense of
wow.
It's just like trenchant insights into cultural issues. It's good stuff. Now, before we get into the issues of the day, you hail from Columbia, Tennessee, and
yes,
this is the reputed mule capital of the world.
What?
That's correct.
Yeah, the
mule?
Mule capital of the world. And lest people scoff at that, I want you to tell the story how, but for the mules from Columbia, Tennessee, we'd all be speaking Russian.
Exactly. Well, there's a period in the Afghan War in the 1980s when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, when there was a need to send Stinger missiles over mountain ranges, and this is all recounted in Charlie Wilson's War. And the Afghan donkeys weren't up to the task, and so allegedly some Columbia mules were recruited to carry the Stinger missiles over the mountains to be used against the Soviet helicopters and help turn the tide in the war. So we claim to be the mule capital of the world. We have a Mule Day every year in April. So I think, I don't know how many competitors we have for that title.
Mule Day.
Well, the real question is
all the kids off school on Mule Day?
Well, yeah, and when does Tom Hanks play the mules in the movie about the mules?
Right. That's the glaring hole here in the story of the Cold War, is we have not had the Mule movie.
Absolutely. All right, you recently wrote a piece about O'Reilly per his departure from Fox last week, and you talked about the toxic conservative celebrity culture. Explain what you mean.
Yeah, what I mean about that, and this is something that I've been disturbed about for a while, is that it seems like in conservative media, the media's been good at elevating people because they're fighters, or because they tell it like it is, or tell people off, and at the same time time that they've had some pretty glaring and pretty obvious character flaws. I mean, look, a lot of this stuff about O'Reilly has been known for a long time, and people look the other way because they love the no-spin zone. And then we have some younger conservative people, conservative celebrities rising up like a Tommy Lauren or a Milo Yiannopoulos, and they love how they tell off the other side. And it can be a toxic culture because you're forsaking other values just for their righteous indignation. And this is kind of the flip side of what you see on the left with these left-wing celebrity comics who, they're the coin of the realm for them is that they're mocking and they're condescending. And then on the right, you've got all of this anger and righteous indignation. But what's happening often is you're covering up a multitude of sins for the sake of these ratings, for the sake of the temporary satisfaction of seeing someone tell off your political enemies. But, you always tend to pay a price. I mean, down the line, Tommy Lauren, Milo Yiannopoulos, they rose fast, they fell fast. Bill O'Reilly rose for a long time and has now fallen really fast. So has Roger Ailes. I mean, it's exposed a culture at Fox News that had been enabled for a long time. It turned out to be really toxic. And so I think it's important that we find people who fight fair and also have some honor and integrity in their lives.
Well, Bill O'Reilly is going to release a new episode of his No Spin News podcast today. Do you think he's going to be, apologetic, or is he going to be feisty and just deny? What do you think we're going to hear from him?
I don't know. I mean, this is a guy who's been really, really feisty and fought hard, even when he's written checks for sexual harassment lawsuits totaling $13 million. And look, I've been around the law long enough, and I've actually been around employment law long enough. And back before I joined National Review, I was a commercial litigator years and years ago. And I know what a nuisance settlement is. That's when you pay somebody a little bit of money to go away.
Mm-hmm.
$13 million is not a nuisance settlement. $13 million, that amount of money paid out to several women, is not what's paid out when there's no merit to allegations at all. And, some of this stuff has been caught on tape. So, he should be contrite. He should be apologetic. But I think that's one of the reasons for his downfall is that he wasn't. He never was. And, I hope he is. I hope he, has some personal transformation here. But look, the conservative movement's just got to stop overlooking this kind of thing simply because you like that people fight really hard, or you like that they're on your side as opposed to the other side. We should expect better out of our public figures.
You've written extensively about these totalitarian re-education centers, also known as colleges and universities in America, and we spoke about it at length in our sit-down for Against the Current. I wanted to relay a story that I heard over the weekend and get your reaction to it since you're so well-versed in this space. So I played golf with an attorney who was one of the founding partners of one of the premier law firms in Chicago, because those are the kind of circles I run in because I'm a big shot.
Okay.
All right. And he was at a dinner with Steve Wynn, of course, the casino mogul, who is now the RNC finance chair. And Steve Wynn told him a story because they were talking about the intolerance on campuses and the restriction of free speech and free expression. He said, let me tell you a story. This is Steve Wynn telling this small group. He is a University of Penn grad, so Ivy League. They came to him a couple years ago. I think it was on the occasion of like his 50th anniversary of his graduation, that class. And said, wanted you, the administration came to him and said, we want to you to head up this big fundraising drive and this big event and have you be the marquee name and all that. And Wynn said, fine. And he said, here's something I'd like to do. I'd like to donate $5 million to the University of Penn to endow a chair for Department of Conservative Intellectual Thought.
Oh.
And did
they turn him down?
They turned him down.
Oh.
And wait, this is the key. Then he said, okay, let me do it this way. Because the president of the university or whoever he was speaking with, it certainly a senior official said, no, Steve, I can't do that. He said, okay, let me do this. $5 million to endow a chair for a Department of Conservative Thought, and $5 million to endow a chair for a Department of Liberal Intellectual Thought.
Seems fair.
No. Can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he didn't donate anything, and he didn't show up to the event. But the point is, it's not like the idea of balance. That is still not good enough. It has to be essentially the takeaway. It has to be complete submission to leftist orthodoxy. And we're talking about an Ivy League school like University of Pennsylvania, David French.
Well, right. I mean, this is what they would say. Well, if you endow that chair, you're depriving us of our academic freedom. But here's the problem. They've used their academic freedom to completely and totally impose and empower one point of view above all others. Or to the extent that they have diversity, it's the diversity between the left and the far left. I mean, when I was teaching at Cornell Law School years and years ago, and the diversity on the faculty was, is George W. Bush evil, or is George W. Bush idiotic, or is he both? But that's, not really intellectual diversity.
Right.
And so that's the kind of monoculture you have on campuses, and breaking through that monoculture is incredibly difficult, because here's what I know is going through the mind of that fundraiser, of that administrator, as he's talking about this multi-million-dollar gift. This is in a university that probably has a multi-billion-dollar endowment. He says, that small amount of money isn't worth the hassle that I would experience from my campus and from my faculty bringing in known conservatives and granting them, tenure track status and promising slots for people who study conservative thought. That is just not worth it. There's no way I could make that work on my campus without causing a constant headache and constant pain.
Well, right, and one of the points that I contend is that when people say, "Where are the administrators? Where are the department heads? Where are the adults on campus?" Whoa. The adults on campus know exactly what's going on. They're part of it. They're complicit, if not cheerleaders, and that's something I don't think people truly appreciate.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to some of the more radical activism, the administrators on campus are not just cheerleaders; they're facilitators, they're organizers. Because let's not forget, the ranks of the administrators include, all these deans of diversity centers and diversity deans and things like that. And they're absolutely on the front lines of activism.
Well, I have to tell you, I really enjoyed your article. It's sad, but it's a poignant article you wrote, a suicide in Texas, about the University of Texas Arlington student who was accused, or he got a glance from a gay student, and then the student turned it into something that it was not.
Right. I mean, there is a crisis, a constitutional crisis on campus right now, and one of the crises is a crisis of due process. So here you had a student. There was a he said situation where a straight student said that a gay student made a pass at him that he didn't like, and he got up and moved seats in class. And the gay student said that the straight student had made fun of him and called him, gay slur. And the administration, rather than conducting a fair hearing, as the policy dictates, this is the allegations in a lawsuit, the administration essentially delegated decision-making to one person, heard from both sides, but prevented the straight student from gaining access to any witnesses, from communicating with any witnesses, found him responsible for sexual harassment, and essentially began to crush his academic career. And the poor kid later ended up committing suicide, just a few days later. And, we don't know all the ins and outs of the human heart and why somebody would do that. But it's a horrible story, and it's a story where there was clearly, again, if these allegations of the lawsuit are correct, clearly agenda-driven witch hunt environment against this straight student, depriving him of due process, depriving him of a fair hearing. And the thing is, this is not all that unusual on campus. There are dozens and dozens of lawsuits and threatened lawsuits right now on college campuses across the country because of this witch hunt environment created by campus radicals who believe, for example, that people don't ever lie about rape or people don't ever lie about sexual assault. And they're trying to wipe out, predatory male culture or toxic masculinity. And so young men across campuses across the United States are being subject to these kangaroo courts. And it's a unfolding scandal that parents are only just now becoming fully aware of.
Parents better pay attention to where your kids are going to college or where you're sending them. David French, senior writer for National Review, senior fellow at the National Review Institute. David, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.